Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Plane Talk. Today I wanted to go over two topics. What is a scrub plane? How do you sharpen it? How is it set up and its history? And the other topic is woods to use in the workshop. Very simply put, a scrub plane, well, if we step one step back, a plane is nothing more, any plane, is nothing more than some sort of body to hold the blade. It's a chisel in a body. That's all. So a scrub plane and the history of a scrub plane is very simple. Let's start with the history. Early on, planes were nothing more than a single piece of iron with a welded steel blade on the front. Eventually, they made homogeneous steel and so on. But it was just a single piece, no chip breaker. What they learned was the chip breaking action of keeping the cutting edge close to a very tight mouth broke the chips and gave you a smoother cut. Now, one inherent property of wooden body planes is they wear. The soles have to be trued up, they wear. And that wear causes the mouth to open, giving you a rougher cut. So what they did, and this plane's about 150 years old, what they did was to take their planes, and usually they were short planes, but sometimes they were jack planes, and they cambered the blade more and more to take rough cuts. That, in my uneducated opinion, having read hundreds of books and articles and magazines over 46 years, tells me that the scrub plane was never initially a specific plane. There was a plane that you read back in history, and it talks about it being the foreplane, the plane used before any other plane. And it was always a rougher iron, cambered, something that could be easily sharpened. And that's the way work in your workshop should be, and that is always use the tool, and I don't care what operation you're doing, but always use the tool that's the easiest to maintain first. Cheapest to make or buy, easiest to maintain. So when setting up your scrub plane, you want to extend the blade just enough to get started, because you need to do some testing. You want it approximately in the middle of the sole. Okay? You want it in the middle of the sole, and this is the only plane that I recommend to either lay down on your bench or put it up on a stick of some sort, because it will gouge your bench. Now, before we go any further, you can also take any plane that you have and convert it either temporarily or permanently to a scrub plane. If it's temporarily, all you do is give your blade a little more camber, and it's a scrub plane, or a roughing plane, or a foreplane. I don't care what you want to call it. It would be the plane you would use to get you a slightly smoother surface, flattened surface, before you start using your good smooth or jack plane. Some people have talked about converting iron body planes to scrub planes. I have never had to convert one. I did stumble on this one, and I do basically make my own just by putting in a different curved iron. But I always felt that unless for some reason you have to take off a 1/4 inch of wood, that the maximum amount that you're going to be planing off should be about a 1/16 to maybe an 1/8 of an inch. And that still is a lot of wood. An 1/8 of an inch is a lot of wood. So you can take any plane and just put a cambered blade in it and set it up. Now, if the mouth is too tight, you can move your frog back a 1/16 of an inch or so. That'll help. On this one, this ECE plane that I have, I made an iron that's kind of thick, so I can only take a maximum of about a 1/16 of an inch cut. I could put a thinner iron in there and solve the problem. So back to how do you use it? Well, I have a board here that I got, a piece of pine. It was used for something in the barn 20 years ago. It's been sitting in a corner. So I took the wire brush and I brushed it off, got all as much gunk off as I could, and we're going to flatten it. Now, this is just me, but I see people attacking it by going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, it works, especially if the board is 12 inches wide or wider. And then I see a lot of people going on the diagonal. And that's okay too. Just remember, you go one way, and you got to go the other. And you see, I'm just taking these little 1/2 inch grooves off, creating some, showing me where the high and low spots are. So I can give that just a little more iron. You can also just go straight at it, understanding you're going to get tear out. But you see, that's only about a 1/16 of an inch. So when people talk about setting these planes up with huge exposures, it just makes me want to cringe. That's what you do. And I guess the reason it got the name scrubbing is basically it's like when you take a scrub brush and you scrub the floor. Now, for me, the scrub plane has very limited use. A dedicated scrub plane, because it leaves you with tear out and it moves a lot of material. I personally prefer, if it's a small project, I'll use the ECE and I'll just go with the grain. And it's not a massive cut, not a huge cut. And you just work the board until the highs and lows start to go away. But my favorite is my jack plane because it has the length. Okay, you can go from one end to the other, or you can start at this end and work your way back, lifting like that. The reason why you lift is you've already cut this section. So now I've already cut this section. Now I'm going to cut this section. Lifting. And then finally the end. And then if you want, you go from the end to the end. Now, we've got a hollow here. So here's where I want to caution you about the use of a severely cambered blade or a scrub plane. It's not for every application. And let me show you why. So I put a rough arc on here. Don't know what it is. It's an arc. I honed the edge and I set the chip breaker on there. Well, in a scrub plane situation, you can only bring the chip breaker up to the two outer corners. You can't go any further. So effectively, the cutting area, which is in the middle, doesn't have a lot of chip breaking capability, virtually none. So let's say you're going to take this to a piece of curly maple. Something with bird's eye. Something with some sort of high figure. Well, you can, but you have to bring the blade back and use less of it. So you take a finer and finer cut and then skew it a little bit. Okay? So right here on this end, I have a whirly, knotty section. Okay, you can see it's tearing out all along this edge, and it's not really tearing out too much in here. This is all sappy, gummy pine right here. Really sticky. It's worse than doing a knot. Knots are hard, they're brutal. Brutal on your plane. So if you're doing curly maple, you're back to taking much finer cuts. So, that leads me to the point, why use a cambered blade? Why not just avoid chip out and tear out and ruining your wood surface? Just go to your regular jack plane and just start taking fine cuts once you get to a certain point. So like right here, this is all tore out. In here, in here. I'll show you how to get rid of that. So, we go back to just using the jack plane with the cambered iron to get down to some sort of flat surface. And then stop. Stop. Don't use it anymore. Put it away and get your real jack plane. You're finally set, finely tuned. But here's back to the original statement. Use a scrub plane to get rid of the dirt and the oxidation in preparation for either a jack plane, a number 6 4-plane, or even a 7 or 8 triplane. And then start your smoothing, your leveling process. Okay? Yes, it's going to be slower. Absolutely. But you know that old saying, haste makes waste? Well, it's true. And by the way, when you're using a pencil to mark things on wood that are not cut lines, use the side of the pencil. If you use the point, you will dig in, and that'll go deeper. Maybe you want that. I don't know. So here we go. You can go full length, or you can go do that shorter section like I showed you before, lifting your plane on the side towards the uncut side. See, like this. You can also lift the heel up and drag the toe, or you can lift the toe up and drag the heel. But when you're doing rough work with a jack, I like to tilt it. So now, as you can see, some of the tear out's starting to go away. And that brings up the topic, very emotional topic, of what type of woods do you use in your workshop? Well, for me personally, the first answer, excuse me, is always the wood you got. The wood that's available to you and you can afford, especially if it's a practice piece or a prototype. A lot of people use pine, and there's different types of pine. This is eastern white pine. I got it at a local sawmill, air dried it, and I actually built a wall out of it. And that was taken down and replaced with something else over time. Pine has a lot of pitch in it. A lot of pitch. For cabinet makers, what they usually do is kiln dry it. Because if not, areas like this, it's pure gum. That's gum. It's like rosin. It gums up the blades and the tools and everything. See what I mean? It'll get in there. It'll gum everything up. My preferred wood years ago was pine because it was cheap, it was available, and actually the furniture I was making, people love pine. The more knots, the better. That's what they wanted. You know, customers always right, even when they're wrong. But I also like tulip poplar. Doesn't have the pitch problem. Tends to be more clear, less knots. Works beautifully with hand tools and power tools. You get some crazy ones. I did a video a while back about planing against the grain in a piece of poplar. It was just nasty. But soft maple, which can be silver maple, red maple, it's a bunch of them. That's not bad. If you get it where it's not stained, you can actually condition it and stain it to look like any wood you want. Cherry, oak, well, cherry and walnut mostly, because the grain is closed and it's tight. Now, another use for the scrub plane is the edges. Now, it is going to tear out, but if you have a ½ inch to take off, hit it with the scrub plane first, get rid of the dirt, the grime. See it? It's just going to tear out. And I don't care, like in this piece of wood, I don't care what direction you go, it's going to tear. But see, I've gotten rid of most of the dirt now. So I can come back in with my scrub slash jack, set a little bit finer. Always use the tool that's easiest to sharpen first and set up. Okay? Now you come in with your finely set jack and you work your edge. And you'll get rid of your tear out. So I guess the big thing is always knowing how much material you have, how much you can take off, and the tools you've got to do it with. When I was building furniture, naturally we always had the table saw, so I'd put a sharp rip blade in, and I'd rip to within about 1/16 of an inch. And the final amount was only taken off with a finely set smoother. That's it. So you didn't have tear out issues. I'm getting a good workout. My cardiovascular and vascular surgeon would be proud of me. So how did we do? It's not tear out free down here. There's a couple of really rough sections. There's a chip on the corner there. Got a knot there. But that edge is clean. The surface we were working, it's a little rough up in here. Here. It's always going to be rough around the knots. Still got a divot there. Sweating. Oh, let's see. It's a nail hole there. Screw hole. And then back here we still got some more work to do. But the next step from here would be a smoother. And here again, give yourself some pencil lines so you know where you've been and where you're going. And here I pick up. With my smoother I always pick up. It's light enough. You see here there's a chip and a chip. You can work this area and get rid of those. If it's not a joinery surface, you can work out defects with your smoother. Yeah, that's all smooth now. So I hope this helps somebody. I know it helped me. Lost a little more weight. I want to thank you all so much for being here. Subscribing and giving me the thumbs up if something helps you out. And to those of you who have found the donate to channel button, that's really great. So we went over 1,000 subscribers. That means I got to give that plane away. Got to figure out how to do that. I like the postcard idea. I just got to figure out, do I want you sending it just to my post office or just send it to my house? Either way, we're going to do postcards. So start looking around in your town. See if there's any local postcards from businesses, from things like your local farm museum or some historic site in your town or business or school. And go grab a postcard. If you want to win that nice plane, all you have to do is put a stamp on it and send it in to me. More on that when we come back again. So what do you think? Not a bad looking piece of wood. It's just knotty pine. It's got some screw holes in it. But I can still use that board as some secondary wood in a project. Or for that matter, if I want to get adventurous, I could cut this section out here, resaw it in half. Look at that. I'm preconditioning the wood. Resaw that in half and create a book-matched lid for like a jewelry box. Head out to your shop. Go make some shavings. Walter out.